me to start recording. So we're recording now. Which is great. Does anyone have any questions about? We have 2 more classes left. I think things have been going relatively smoothly as far as lecture prep questions. But if anyone has any questions about the last couple of assignments that we have, please feel free to give me a shout now or shoot me an email. Also, if you have any concerns about attendance or anything like that, I'm always available to chat. Just let me know.
Professor, I have a question.
Yeah.
So I sent you my lecture prep question before, and you said it was too early. So now that since we only have 2 more classes, can I send both of them to you now, or just one by a week?
If you have questions for today for Austyn, then send them to me now. That would be great.
Oh, not today, but my questions was for the next 2 classes.
Yeah, you can send them to me this week. That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Great. Well, here is another flash of the attendance question. Are you thinking of starting your own company? Why or why not? Very excited to hear your guys' answers. Austyn, I believe you're on. Are you there? Let me see. She signed on. Okay. I just sent her chat just to see. Maybe she's not quite there yet. Okay, so I have, I'll just skip over this really quickly. I know one thing I really like to cover in this class with you guys, which I'm used to teaching in a classroom, so it's a little bit easier to go through the specifics, but just a very high level bird's eye view of what I think is important for you guys to know walking out of here on how a designer should read a sales report. I think you've heard from a lot of people this semester about how important it is and how strong it makes you as a designer if you can kind of understand that sales report a little bit. So this is basically my little crash course in how to read one. But my recommendation is definitely that when you first start on the job, the first thing you do is to get with the buyer or merchandiser or someone in planning, someone that you know knows the sales reports very well, and sit down with them and ask them if they can take you through the sales report. And have them walk you through on a Monday all of the selling reports in detail, and make a conscious effort for, I'd say, at least the first month to keep going back to them and keep going through and making sure you understand the numbers. It's not that you need to know how to do the math. You just need to know when you're looking at the sales report what it's telling you and how you can react to that and how you can become a better designer and design better for the next season. Austyn is just texting me. I just want to write back to her.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes. And then
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Thank you for your help. Can you see me?
I can't see you, but do you see the video right next to where the microphone is?
Here we go.
Perfect.
Hi.
Hi, great. Students, we're going to come back to this sales report at the end of the session. I'm just going to flip back a screen. So Austyn, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
We can't quite see you yet. Is it working on your side, do you think?
Yes, I can see. Hold on. Let me see something else.
There you are. Perfect. Okay. Great.
How are you?
Awesome. Good. Welcome. I will give you an introduction and then we can jump into questions.
Great. Thank you.
So with a degree in fine arts from the University of Colorado at Boulder, Austyn Zung has worked in the fashion industry for over 15 years. While studying fashion design at Parsons, she held an internship at Isaac Mizrahi and started her own menswear collection. In 1998, Austyn moved to Italy to join John Bartlett as men's and women's design director. 2 years later, Oscar de la Renta asked her to join the design team, where she ultimately held the position of vice president of design. After a few seasons designing in New York with Mr. de la Renta, Austyn also began working with him on Balmain Couture in Paris. After over 10 years working on designer collections and couture, Austyn decided to make a transition to the realm of casual American sportswear. She joined The Gap in 2005 as the Executive Vice President of Design and Product Development for the retail concept Fourth in Town. In this position, Austyn was involved in every aspect of the brand, including creative direction, marketing, and business development. Austyn decided to pursue another position of hers, interior design, and she worked on several residential and commercial projects, including a New York City loft, a Boston penthouse, an 1800s farmhouse in Millbrook, New York, and a boutique jewelry store in New York. She was then recruited to Ann Taylor for over 10 years ago to head up loft design. Since then, she's been promoted to oversee Lou and Gray and Ann Taylor design as well. Austyn's aesthetic has been defined and honed from her years of travel and exposure to various cultures and forms of artistic expression. In both fashion and interiors, Austyn strives to achieve an understated yet eclectic look that possesses an unstudied, elegant ease. Through the unexpected mixture of textures, shapes, and colors, her aim is to create an enduring feeling of true style. So with that, please join me in welcoming Austyn.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. That was a very quick overview of your career, and you have worked at some amazing, amazing places, but would love to hear a little bit more color behind your path.
Yeah. Actually, as you read that, I was thinking, well, we left a few things out, but that's probably just in the sort of the spirit of not having a 3-page long bio. So I started off, I guess I was always, I guess if we go back to high school, I was always very into fashion. I loved, at that point, it was just that I loved shopping. And I grew up in Southern California, and that was back in the 80s. And at that time, there really wasn't, I don't really remember there ever being a job described as fashion designer. I wouldn't have even known how to take my love of clothes and fashion and like jump into the fashion design industry. So I spent some time in Paris at Parsons studying painting and drawing one summer between my junior and senior year. And again, pursued that in college at Boulder, but sort of in between those years, I was always doing different things creatively. I started my own hand painted t-shirt company. I actually then morphed that into sort of a skate and surf streetwear company. That was when the like action sports retailer was really big in Southern California. It was like a lot of surf companies, a lot of skate companies. And so I was always, I guess, a little entrepreneurial also, like always tried to figure out how I could make a business out of what I love doing. And then when I finally made it to New York, so I had already had sort of experience in fashion through my own, through my own companies. And I applied to Parsons after Boulder. Actually, I applied to Parsons for their fashion design curriculum, but immediately I was going to school, but immediately wanted internships too. So that's where you hear about like the internship at Isaac Mizrahi. I had a couple different internships along the way, and because I had already graduated from Boulder, I had my degree in fine arts, and I was going to school with a lot of kids who are still some of my very best friends who didn't have a previous degree. So I became a little bit more interested in working rather than in going to school. So after a year at Parsons, I just continued to do internships, and I had a menswear company at the time, and just sort of kept plugging away at things I loved, and one thing led to another. And actually, I don't know if it was in the bio, as there was the time that I worked at J. Crew also, and then I don't know if in my bio it said that I went and worked for Valentino for a summer. I don't remember you reading that.
No.
So I also, the creative director of Valentina recruited me to come work for them for a summer on menswear because they had known me through my own menswear line. And then, it's just interesting. One thing leads to another. I actually don't really remember, um, going out and like pounding the pavement for jobs. It was sort of like I just started to know a lot of people and build a lot of close relationships, and it was like, one thing led to another, which I think actually, now that I'm talking about it and thinking about it, I think I was just always really open to trying new things. So it wasn't like I had this idea of what my career path was going to look like and I just followed it. It was more like along the way, sort of opportunities and doors opened, and I was just always very curious and wanted to try something different, and sort of kept like stepping into those doors that looked interesting, even if they hadn't been along, what I had thought I would do.
Yeah.
So it's been an interesting path. It's been fun.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a long path.
Yeah. Well, not that long. Can you tell me about like what it's like to switch between menswear and women's wear, for instance? Was that a really steep learning
Yeah,
curve or?
it was much more fun to go into women's wear. Menswear is great because, it's all about the sort of like everything in the detail, because men's fashion doesn't change drastically from year to year, season to season. So it's really about like those slow evolutions that you really work on. And then when you've worked in menswear and sort of honed in on all those details and you jump into women's wear, you're like a kid in the candy shop,
Yeah,
because
I can
it's like,
imagine.
okay, what's the sleeve about this season? What about the print and pattern? What are the color palettes going to be? There's sort of like much more major swings between, what's in fashion, what's not in fashion, and that's so much fun. I love that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Um, so what's a typical, I'm using typical, and this is, probably pre-March 13th, week like at
Yes,
in your current role?
right. Um, so in my current role, I run 3 design teams for 3 very different brands. And I say my job now is literally like I don't know what my day is going to look like from day to day. I know I'm going to have multiple meetings for different brands, all throughout the day. So it's not like Tuesdays with Ann Taylor and Wednesdays with Loft and Thursdays with Lou and Gray. I literally will go from a meeting to a meeting, which is a different brand each time. And I feel like my job is to, okay, put that client's hat on, put that brand hat on, and really be present and in tune with what that brand is about at that moment, and be able to. A lot of what I do right now is reactionary because I have great talented teams who bring me ideas and talk to me about what they feel is important, what's going on, and a lot of what I do is edit and react to what they're talking about. And what they say might strike an idea in me, and so I'll feed that back to them. So it's a very collaborative effort. And that's actually my favorite part of the job, is working with so many people that have so many different ideas and being able to sort of play with those ideas and work those ideas through with them.
Yeah, that's great. Can you tell us about what an entry level job would look like at Ann Taylor, in the design world?
Yeah. Usually what would happen is, we get a lot of interns that either come from schools like FIT or Parsons, or they may come from overseas. So what usually happens on an entry level job is that you would interview for a certain position, and that would usually be like an associate, or there's actually, I forget the title. There's one level below associate, and I can't even remember what we call it now. But anyway, you're usually put into a classification. So when you work at mass market, what I've learned is, because I came from collection and now I'm much more to sort of a mass, vertical retailer, is that we divide the teams between classifications. So like you're doing woven tops, or you're doing pants, or you're doing sweaters, where when you work at a collection level, you're much more apt to be designing every different classification. So if you were to come into Ann Taylor or Loft and Lou and Gray, you'd probably start in one classification, and um, you know, every day could look different. One day you could be sketching new ideas. Another day you could be choosing fabrics. Another day you could be helping put a color palette together. There's a lot of people are, in things for a good part of the day. So the great thing about an entry level position is you're doing multiple interesting things throughout the day, and you're really learning. It's all about really learning, and sometimes you're doing things that you don't think that you're going to enjoy, and that's part of it also. And you may find something that you didn't think that you were going to like that you actually end up loving. So it's an exciting time because you get exposure to a lot of different areas in the design team.
That's great.
Yeah.
And about how long would you say it takes a typical candidate to move along?
It really depends on the candidate. I mean,
Yeah.
some candidates you see, some people you see, and they just come in and they're eager and they're willing and they're capable and talented and smart. And they can also advocate for themselves. And those are the people that you see. The great thing about our design teams is they're very broad. So you don't necessarily have to go just up like this from one position to another position, but there's a lot of opportunity to go up and over. So just because you started in woven tops, if there's not an opportunity in woven tops for you to be promoted, then maybe you want to go into dresses, and there is an opportunity to go into dresses. So there's a lot of movement. And the great thing about working for a company with multiple brands is you can also move within the multiple brands. But to go back to your question, it really depends on the candidate and how, we look for different things. We definitely look for talent, but we also look for work ethic and curiosity. I personally love having people with a strong point of view who are able to articulate that point of view and also listen to other people and collaborate with others. So just because you have a point of view, and we love hearing that, I may disagree with you, and that's okay. That's good. That sort of like give and take back and forth is what makes a better product and a better company.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to lead, I'd say. Do you feel like there's anything that you wish you'd studied in college, if you could go back now that you didn't, that could help you?
I think the smart answer would be, first of all, I love that I studied fine arts in college, and that I went to school for fine arts rather than just right into fashion. I'm glad I have a balance, but I think Boulder was also, a liberal arts school, so I got a very traditional, sort of liberal arts education. But I think the smart answer to your question would be, oh, I wish I had studied business. Because I think fashion comes naturally to me and business does not come naturally to me. But I will also say, having, sort of been through the many years that I've been in fashion, it's not really the business part that interests me. So it would be great for me to have sort of more of a knowledge of it, but I also know it's not the part I would want to pursue.
Right.
A lot of, some of the people I've worked with along the way have said to me, why don't you go and do some merchandising courses, study merchandising, like, do you want your path to perhaps become the president of a brand? And actually I've said, it's crossed my mind a couple times, and then I've said, I don't want to be that person. I think that person has like 50 times more responsibility on their shoulders than I do, and I just don't want that. I love
Yeah.
color and fabric and prints and pattern and textiles. So
And it's hard to get away from that when you enjoy that,
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's good to know that about yourself.
What's that?
It's good to know what you love and what you don't,
Yeah.
so that you can build your path that way too.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's also, I think it was something you said made me interested. I mean, if you taken a business class, you might have not really absorbed much anyway, because it's not how you're inclined to be. So, learning on the job maybe is the better way to go when it's not a subject you're super passionate about.
Yeah, I think it's true. And it's interesting, like I think that, my boss has always described me as a very right brain, left brain person. So I think conceptually directionally I get, okay, this is what needs to happen in the business. And like, how down deep in the numbers do I really want to go? Not so much. So
Yeah. How did you get that first job out of college?
My first job my first job out of college was my own company. So I made
That
it.
was easy.
I made my job.
Yeah.
I built a job for myself. I'm trying
Yeah.
to think after that what my first job was, though. I mean, besides my internships, I'm really trying to think what it was. Um, I think it could have been, I think it could have been J. Crew, actually. Um, I think my own, I'm trying to think it was John Bartlett or J. Crew. I'm sort of confusing my timeline. But at most of my jobs really came from knowing less about where I went to college, less about what I did in college, but more about um, relationships that I had built.
Yeah. That's great. And you're not the first person to tell us that. I think that has been a lot of doors have opened for people because they were open to that opportunities and because they had a good attitude that people wanted to take them with them.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what I always look for. And on my team now, I always look for the best people on my team are definitely the people that I see. If I ever started my own company, these would be the people that I absolutely must take with me.
Yeah, they follow you, which is good. So you had a little bit of a stint with interior design, and I don't know if you're still dabbling in that on the side, but can you tell us a little bit about that experience for you?
Yeah, well, let me tell you how that happened actually. So I was recruited from Oscar de la Renta to start a new brand at the Gap, and it was called Fourth in Town. And it was the jump that I made from really like had been working in collection for quite a long time and jumped to sort of this more mass retail market. And after about 18 months, Gap decided to close Fourth and Town down. So the brand I was working for was no longer there anymore. And at that time, I just thought to myself, I don't really want to do this anymore. I had left collection, which I loved. I mean, working for Oscar was just the most beautiful experience, both from a fashion perspective, but also just from working with a wonderful man perspective.
Yeah.
And I had jumped into this mass retailing and had been running a big team of probably about 30 people. And when you run a big team and you're working in mass market, it's like all about the calendar and all about the budget and all. I mean, they're just it's really there's a process and you stick to the process and you it's just basically drive. And I just couldn't. They closed the business down, and I just couldn't imagine how the Friday, all of those things were so important, all the deadlines, all of the money we could or couldn't spend, and all of those things were so important. And then by Monday, we were literally like throwing our binders of design cards into the Dewey dumpster because the business had ended.
Yeah.
And I was just so disheartened by that. And looking at my team of 30 people saying, you no longer have a job. Like
Yeah.
I couldn't understand how Friday, all of that could have been so important. And Monday I was having to say, oh, it's not important anymore, guys.
Yeah.
So that to me was really heartbreaking. And I just stepped back. My son was I think he was like 2.5 at that time. I just decided I'm going to take some time off. I don't really want to go work in fashion anymore. And my husband, who's an architect, had some ongoing projects, and so I really jumped in and helped him with interiors. But I'd always done my own interiors. It was always been something that I loved and came very naturally to me. I think that if you can, put beautiful shapes and colors and patterns and textures together in a clothing collection, you can do it in a home or an office or a store also. So it just came super naturally to me. Yeah. And it was fun. I liked it because I like interiors because they're more permanent, and we're fashion, we're talking about like what's in this season might not be in next season, and that seems sort of, we're just throwing things out so we can sell more things basically. Which seems so wasteful. So I don't know. I just sort of love the finality of it, and I still love doing it. I actually like doing it more than probably designing clothes now. But I don't do it professionally anymore. I just do it, for my own.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That is, I love to hear the different expressions that a creative person can take on, and obviously in the home, I think is an ultimate way to do that, which is great.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite experience, a favorite place that you've worked along the way?
Oh, I would say my far and away favorite experience was working with Oscar. And when I left John Bartlett, I left Italy and started to work for Oscar, and I really was more interested in getting back to New York City from Italy than I was working for Oscar de la Renta at the time. But I have to tell you, a friend of mine was the creative director there, and he said he actually wasn't a great friend. I met him in Italy at the menswear shows, and we sort of like hit it off quickly. And he goes, "You have to come back and just sit and talk to Oscar and see if it. I think it would be a great thing for you to be there." He was trying to rebuild the studio, make it a younger sort of place at the time. And I went to interview with Oscar over like Thanksgiving. I was coming home to see my family for Thanksgiving from Italy. And I went to Oscar's office and I sat across. Oscar had this big round table in his office. And I sat across from this very just like, well put together, beautiful gentleman. And he has a very thick Dominican accent. I could not understand a thing he said. I was there for an hour and a half conversing somehow, not really understanding anything he said, but knew that, oh my goodness, I have to come. I don't even know, like just be with this person, work with this person, whatever the job entails, I'm in. I'm in. So I moved back, and it was a really special place. At the time, there were probably 6 people in the design studio. It was Oscar and the 6 of us. While I was there, it grew to probably 10. But it's so funny when you said, I think you said my title at Oscar was vice president. The reality of it was there was Oscar and 6 to 9 assistants. I had the title of vice president, but it was, Oscar was in charge, and then we all worked for Oscar, which was the way absolutely it should be. But
Yeah.
there was something about sort of like this tiny little design studio. It was a very, very sort of family environment to work. I didn't have any of the pressures of the things that I now have at mass market, such as the calendar and the budget, etc. It was all about being in that studio with Oscar, just creating beautiful things. And he also just had a very lovely way of living life. He never wanted to be alone. He would like to be surrounded by people and action all the time. And he loved to travel. I traveled with him everywhere. It was just a really, really beautiful, meaningful, broad experience for me. And I often say working for him was less about designing beautiful things, but just learning through the way he worked every day, having such an appreciation for life and enjoying what you do every step along the way. It was a real, and for that, that was absolutely the best place that I've worked so far.
Yeah.
I can't imagine there ever being a better place.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Was it really difficult for you to kind of switch gears from that very couture life to a bit more mass?
Yeah, so I think the thing about me is I had been at Oscar for several years, and I feel like I was not looking for a different job at all. I could have stayed there forever. But when my boss now, Gary Muto, called me, he was at the Gap, and he called, and I didn't know him, but he had a headhunter call me. Um, and I was like, no, no, not interested. Nope, nope. I love it where I am. I'm not gonna. And then of course I hung up the phone, and like my brain starts like, oh, well, I've never done anything like that before. I've certainly never been a head of such a large team, building a new brand, working, in the a little bit, dabbling in the business part of it, dabbling in the marketing part of it, dabbling in the sourcing part of it. And at that time, and many other times in my life, as I think I've mentioned, I'm really curious. I'm really interested in trying things that I've never done before. So as much as I liked my situation and my life working at Oscar, I was just ready. I didn't realize it until it was offered to me. But when I sort of was able to see that the Gap experience as a full picture, I just couldn't imagine not doing it because it was so many things that I had never done before, and I wanted to try new things.
Yeah, that's great. And
So
now,
was it a big change? It was a yes, it was a very big change. And by the way, and I'll tell this to all you students because it's something that might help you in your future. I just basically faked it till I made it. Like I had never worked in such a, as I say, such a big design team. I didn't even know what IT was at the time. I didn't know what HR, human resources was. They were sending me to all these different meetings, and I was just like, oh, sure, I'll go. And I literally faked it until I just didn't, I was just like jumped in with both feet, and it was like sink or swim, and I decided I was going to swim, and there you go.
yeah, and here you are.
It's
And
good. I will say adaptability is a really good characteristic to have.
I would agree 100%. And I'm just making the connection because I didn't make this earlier, but we were connected through Gary Muto, who
Yeah,
now did he bring you over to Ann Taylor?
he
How
did.
did
So
you go?
he eventually left the Gap and went over and worked for Loft. And I think he was there for at least 2 years before he called me and said, "Listen, can you just come over and like help me with the Loft design team? Just come over like 3 days a week. Yeah, it'll be, no big deal." And I was like, "I'm not getting back into fashion. I'm not committing to this at all. But yes, I'll come in. I really like Gary." And I said, "Okay, so I'll come in 3 days a week." And I don't know, very quickly, 3 days turns into 4 days, turns into 5 days, turns into 7 days, turns into three brands later. It's just, again, one of those things where, okay, I'll do it. I'll take it. I'll do it.
And you get
Um,
back
and
in.
that has been an incredible, I've been there almost 10 years now. I haven't reached 10 years, maybe 9 years. And it's been incredible because I have to say, some of the people, the design talent that I work with at Loft, I've built all of those teams, but I am working with some of the best design talent that I've worked with in all of my jobs. It's pretty incredible. They're a really incredible bunch of designers.
That's great. And I mean, it's great to see the way you guys have been looking lately is phenomenal. So I mean, obviously it's
Thank you.
something's rolling and looking good. We
Thank
actually had
you.
I don't know if I told you this. I don't think I did on the phone, but we had Michelle Horowitz in last week, who I know worked on Lou and Gray from a market.
Oh, yes, yes. Oh my gosh, I was just talking about Michelle Horowitz with another good mutual friend of mine the other day. I love her.
Yes, yeah, she was great. I try to get in people that are all from different types of creative roles in the industry. So it was nice to hear from a marketing
Yeah.
perspective last week.
She's incredibly smart, Michelle Horowitz.
Yes,
Incredibly smart. Yeah.
she seems it, which is great. A challenging time for everyone right now to have a great digital strategy. So
Yes, it's true. True.
um, do you feel like there was any point in your career where you would have done something differently, or you feel like you made a mistake in the path you chose?
I don't know about the past. I mean, I make mistakes every single day. Every single day I make mistakes. I have bad ideas that I socialize, and that's just part of the game. I think the only way that you move along is if you take risks and make mistakes. Um, so I mean, I guess that the question is, no, I haven't made any mistakes because all the steps I've made, whether they turned out looking like a success or a failure, haven't been mistakes because they've gotten me where I am now.
Yeah.
There have been times where I've been crushed by things that have happened during my path. For instance, like having to close businesses because I didn't have the funding to keep them going, or when Fourth and Town closed and having to say, "Sorry guys, there's no job for you." There have been really hard times, but I wouldn't look back at any of sort of the steps, the major steps I've taken in my career path as, "Oh, I shouldn't have gone and worked there,"
Yeah.
or "That was a bad move." No, I think every step I've taken, although they haven't all been a walk in the park, have been really valuable to me.
That's
Really
great.
valuable.
Wonderful. How do you find inspiration for your design work?
Well, we find a lot of inspiration in travel. I have three different VPs of design, one for each brand, and each sort of get their sort of design inspiration from different places. Personally, I get a lot of inspiration and always have from travel and different cultures, different, I just think, the world is just so full of like visual information. So I find that I'm usually most inspired by traveling.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that my brand leaders get the same way. The brand leader of Loft, Liz Brunemer, who's the VP of design there, it's all about travel for her. And then for Lou and Gray, my Lou and Gray head of design is usually I think is designed by usually inspired by different artists, different paintings. So we come about it depending on the brand from different ways.
Yeah. And where's your favorite place to travel, or is there one?
Oh my gosh, I have so many favorite. I mean, I don't even think I have one that isn't a favorite. I love, the places that come to mind to me are Morocco. Absolutely, I love Morocco. I love Istanbul. I feel like I love things that are just throwing visual stimulation at you, like sort of like a visual overload. Um, but then I love places like London, like sort of more like city cosmopolitan places, London, Paris. I love beach vacations. So I'm game.
Yeah.
I'm really open to all different sorts of travel.
Yeah. Would you put Oscar as the most interesting person you've met throughout your career, or is there anyone else that you would put up there?
I would say Oscar is definitely the most interesting person that I've met. And for so many reasons, I mean, he was definitely the most passionate person I've ever met. Passionate about fashion for sure. I mean, the guy, he just lived, breathed, loved it. But then again, as I said about Oscar, he was passionate about everything he did: eating, dancing, music. It was just he was just that way in
Yeah.
general. But
Yeah.
yes, he was definitely the most interesting person that I've met.
Yeah. Anyone else that you?
And by the way, I met a lot of interesting people through him also. He
Mm.
was as I told you, he loved to be surrounded by different people. So there were always, different musicians, magazine editors. It was always like we were surrounded by, his table was full of interesting people.
Yeah.
It was great. It was a great time.
That's great. Why are you passionate about design?
Um, it's interesting. I think it's just what comes really naturally to me. I'm not, it just is I don't even know if it's like in me. It's in my blood. I've always been interested in it. I mean, even, before I understood that there were jobs around design, it was just clothes, fashion, color, texture, fabrics are always things that I've just been really, really passionate about. I really do think it's in my DNA. I'm
Yeah.
not sure. I didn't grow up my mom was very stylish and had a great taste level and knew how to put a beautiful home together. It came very naturally to her. She never worked in the industry. But maybe I learned some of it from her, maybe just growing up around it.
Great. Good inspiration.
Yeah.
Well, I think, it's funny because, by the way, thank you for rescheduling and coming with us today, because I know we were supposed to have you on February 10th.
Yes, yes.
And it's interesting looking back at the questions from February 10th and how different everything feels now here on, April 27th. But
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, what do you feel like the greatest challenges facing the industry right now? But I think we all know, the elephant in the room
Yeah.
with being shut down so much. But, how is the Intailer dealing with this crisis?
I mean, this has been absolutely incredible in so many ways. When we all started talking about this back in, I guess it was late February, it was sort of like, oh, ha, 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 like that's ever going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And I just remember being in the offices and people starting to get nervous about it and just not really thinking much further. And then my husband actually got sick, and he didn't have COVID, but we thought he did, and we went and we got him tested, and we didn't find out for 5 days if he was positive or negative. But during that 5 days, I wasn't allowed to go back in the office because although the office was still running, people were still going in every day. They said if there's a possibility of you being exposed, you can't come in. So I totally understood and was fine with that. And then between that day and the day that we found out he was negative, the office dispersed.
We're all closed.
Right.
Yeah.
And they said, and probably, you guys are so familiar with this. I remember the leadership team saying, we're going to do a test. We're going to do a test, a work from home test to see if it'll work. And we're going to start it that next Monday. Well, we started that test and we never came back.
Yeah.
And I have to
And
say,
was that like March 16th or 15th or whatever?
I think it was like the 15th, something like that.
And everyone else.
Or maybe probably the 15th. I think you're exactly right. And I've sort of been, at that time I was like, how's this going to work? We're in an industry where I need to see things in person and touch and feel them. And how are we going to exchange ideas? And we're so visual. I mean, we set up these big elaborate concept rooms. How are we going to do this? So it's been absolutely phenomenal how the teams of people have taken what they do and been able to, again, here comes that word, adapt to the new normal of everybody in their own home, sharing ideas, talking about, building up businesses, what products are we going to use, like setting up digital presentations. I have to say, I'll talk a little bit about some of the struggles that we're dealing with from a business perspective, but from a let's get the job done perspective, the design teams have not missed a beat. It's been amazing to me how, and obviously doing it in totally different ways. Like this is a totally different world and a totally different way of working. And people are just figuring it out, and by the way, we're not only figuring it out, but we are learning how to work in a more effective and efficient way. So when we come out of this, we will take what we have learned and implement that into our new way of working. Which has been, it's been liberating, I guess. Like with all the challenges, it's also been quite liberating because we've been allowed to just invent a new way of working, where before, like when you work for companies and they have a certain process and they've been doing the process for a while, I mean, I call it, it's like trying to steer the Titanic, right? It's like you've got this big ship and you've got a new idea, and to get 500 people in agreement with that new idea to turn that ship is very, very, it's a very difficult and very slow process. But this has made it, it's made it necessary to change our process. So there's been some silver linings to this. Now the business part of it is very challenging because we have hundreds and hundreds of stores.
Yeah.
So obviously, right now we have mostly an online business, which our client is still very engaged in it, which has been amazing. We just didn't know, is everybody just gonna sort of shut down and not want to shop? That hasn't happened at all. Our online business has obviously picked up, and now we've opened some, we're doing some, pick up at curbside, like use some stores for distribution centers and also pick up at curbside. And that has been phenomenal also. So, I mean, reality check, business is not what it was, 2 months ago by any means. But again, sort of adapting to the reality of today, I'm really impressed by what we've been able to do. And knock on wood, who knows what this is going to bring long term. I mean, I don't know. You guys see the news just like I do. It's like people are now starting to sort of relax social distancing. Is that going to work? Who knows? Are people going to start getting sick? We just don't know. It's really dealing with the unknown right now.
Yeah.
But I will take away from this how the impression that's been put on me of how quickly people can really just figure out a way to work in the new normal.
Yeah.
It's really inspiring. It's really inspiring.
Logistically, I mean, you guys were talking about this back in February. Were you already having issues with getting your stock in from overseas? Or has
No.
it been no.
Interestingly enough, that had not happened yet. You know, now obviously we're seeing a lot of the we had not been impacted by that at all, and now of course we are, because even now, though now, you know, we're trying to get more product in for summer, but a lot of our factories in India are closed. They're not making or shipping things. You know, we have a little bit of buffer because things were already on boats getting over. I mean, the transport time is several months. But we will start seeing the impact of, I'm dealing with it every day. Like we don't know what we're getting for the month of July. You know, this is what we want, but we don't know if these factories are going to be able to deliver. So we will start to see that impact, definitely. It's gonna be messy, definitely. It's not gonna be perfect, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
We'll do our best.
You know, I have a friend who works for Macy's, and she's telling me, oh, we're canceling all of our Q2 orders and we're canceling a lot of our Q3 orders. And I just am thinking, what's going to happen to all that product? You know,
Yeah.
where does it go?
Yeah, you know what? I wouldn't say I don't understand how you can have a business if you've canceled all your orders. You know,
Yeah.
you're definitely canceling some of our orders, and we will be able to get some of our orders because of factory issues and mill issues. But we need things for the client. I mean, people are going to want something.
Yeah.
So again, I think it'll be a little messy, but we'll do the best we can.
Yeah, you know, being vertical is nice because I think you can have a little bit more of a say from start to finish versus a Macy's who's buying from vendors and has to kind of, you know, deal with it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's tough. It's a rough time. You know, I was looking back at some of the questions that you had sent back then, and like, what are the biggest challenges for, you know, the 2020? We are upon the biggest challenge right now, and we never would have imagined this.
probably the biggest challenge of all of our careers. I mean, to be completely honest. So it's
lives, right? Like, I mean,
let's hope at least.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have to tell you, and not to, you know, I don't want to minimize all the devastation that's going on in this world at all. But I don't mind working from home. I'm enjoying it, you know?
Yeah. Definitely some positivity you can glean out of the situation, which
Right.
is
Exactly.
I do think it's interesting because I think that this, number one, the idea of remote learning, but also, you know, the idea of working from home, or, you know, distance working has been kind of dabbled in, and I think this has forced everyone to throw it into the mix, and I'm very interested to see how that's going to shake out after.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I really feel though for like the middle school, high school, college, you know, that's such an incredible social time, and part of what, I mean, my, you know, the greatest experiences that I had at Boulder were because of my friends who I was with. You know, I couldn't tell you any of my teachers' names or really what I learned, but that's where you know, you develop your social well-being, and so that's painful, I think, for a lot of people.
No, I feel for all the kids.
There is something to say though about, you know, what you said there. There's something to say though about like the slowing down. Like, we're all having to slow down quite a bit, and I do think, you know, I talked to a lot of different students, different ages, from I would say late middle school through high school, not college so much, but they're all much less stressed than they were. They say that I don't have the, you know, so many people deal with anxiety these days. And although COVID-19, like a pandemic, brings an anxiety of its own, they all say they're just less stressed with the day to day.
Yeah.
So there's something to be said about a little bit of a slowing down.
Yeah. And you know, I think one of the bright spots I have found is the lack of FOMO. You know, if you're missing out, you know, I feel like there's all this pressure on me as an adult, but definitely on younger, children and students from a socialization perspective, that you're going to miss something if you have to stay home. And right now it's like, no, you know, we all are staying home. We're all doing the same thing. We're all with our families and kind of getting back to basics. And that is refreshing in a lot of
Yeah,
ways.
I agree. I
We
agree.
all wish we knew how long it would last, and we wish that there were not people out there really suffering and getting sick, but
Right.
there's,
And maybe we can learn a little bit from it. Like we're not going to stay like this forever, but maybe we can sort of remember that actually it's sort of nice that nothing's going on. Like that's okay, you know?
yeah, yeah, it's true. Well, thank you. Thank you for your perspective. And it's really interesting to hear how everyone's kind of moving and reacting in the industry too, because I think, you know, we're in our own bubble here talking about things. The students actually for their midterm turned in one question answer was look at the assignment was looking at the state of the business profession and the changes that we all believe COVID is going to enact on those predictions. And what I loved is that of 50 essays that I read, pretty much everyone had new ideas. I would be reading along. I'm on like the 45th one, and I thought, I didn't even think of that. I didn't even think about how the repercussions of X, Y, Z. So, you know,
Yeah,
there's going to be a lot of things happening in the next 6 months. But
absolutely. And you're absolutely right. Out of times like this come new ideas, come invention, come creativity. So I think that that's promising. That's
totally.
great. I think I need to read the 50 papers of the students.
Yeah, that's true. I know. I should publish them. I'll have to ask everyone's permission.
Yes.
Well, with that, I want to turn it over to the students. I have a couple from some of my international students who couldn't join live. Um, What advice would you give to someone who wants to work in Europe for finding work there?
Oh,
This comes from Nidhiba. Sorry.
there are so many executive recruiters and headhunters is a name. So I think it's getting hooked up with those different recruiters and some of them work primarily in Europe. So and I haven't done research on this in so long. But that is definitely, I think, one of a way to get in. And also, I would imagine, do you guys have European schools come over looking at your students, at FIT students?
I personally can't speak to that. I don't know if there's a student on here who could, but I could definitely look into that for students. I think that's a good call
I
out.
think sometimes, companies, like for instance, we go over to Europe. What we've done every year is go over to Europe and recruit kids, mostly out of the UK, out of the UK schools, recruit to have students come over and be interns with us for a year, and that gets their foot in the door. They want to work in the US. That gets their foot in the door. So I wonder if there are programs maybe from companies abroad that come over to schools in the US. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Not sure.
Yeah, no, that's a good call out for sure. Um, if all the students who have their hands raised could turn on their cameras before we open up to you guys, that would be great. My next question is from Xiao Yu Wen. She asked, how do you find a balance between creativity and commercial, particularly in, while you're working for such a large company with so many stores?
Yeah. And that's probably been one of the hardest things for me, and especially coming from collection to much more mass retail. I think no matter, I feel like no matter how we approach it, it's the design team approach it. There's always a team of merchants that's going to water it down a little bit. So
Yeah.
sometimes a little bit, sometimes a lot. And that is a struggle, I will say. I no longer take it personally. I think when I was younger, I took it personally, and I see a lot of my young designers taking it personally. But I think what I need to do, what I do now is put the hat of the client on and really think about it through the client's eyes. Like, what does the loft client want? Who is she? What are her shopping behaviors? So it's a constant balance. I mean, when I say I'm working with some of the most talented designers, I mean you go in these concept rooms that they build and you've never seen. I mean, it's just so incredibly beautiful. Like it's
Yeah.
so elevated, it's so emotional, and when you go into the stores or you go online and you see the clothes that we're offering, you can see sort of the spirit of what was in that room, but it is definitely a watered down version of that. And that's hard. So I guess it's just something you learn that's part of the reality. And that doesn't mean, I guess, where the balance is, we start from like the ultimate creative position. I mean, we put it all out there, and then it sort of morphs through the process of through the product, sort of the life cycle process of the product. It's not easy. It's
Yeah.
not easy.
Yeah.
You get a thick skin.
Alyssa Davis, did you have a question?
Yeah, hi. Hold on, I'm gonna try and share.
Hi.
Okay, wait. Do you guys
There
see
you
me?
are. Yes.
Okay.
Hi, how are
So-
you?
I'm good. How are you?
I love your skirt. Gorgeous.
Thank you. I have two questions actually. So the first one is kind of more about like how do you balance your personal life as well as your career? Because looking at everything that you've done, it seems like you take on like these really big roles. And so like where do you find that balance to like leave it at work and then have your own personal life at home?
Yeah. Well, that's changed through time. So when I was your age, I didn't have any balance. I was, studying and working. And then I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. We'd work in the studio until 10:30 at night, and then we'd all go out to dinner together. So there was like really no balance. It was just all revolved around work. But I think as I've grown up and my priorities have changed, and having relationships and a family, and as I've grown up through my career, my support systems have also changed. So before, I didn't have anybody working for me. I was the designer in the studio, or the senior designer in the studio. So it was like I did everything. Me and the other designers did everything. But now as you sort of climb up and you have your responsibilities become larger, but you actually get your work done through other people. So now all the work I do is actually done through other people. So I have a really good balance. I now can, well, I don't walk out the door anymore because I'm at home, but now I'm able to have a really nice work-life balance. But that also becomes, as you sort of climb up and have a bigger team, you have to get better at giving very clear direction to people also. And that's something that I think I've just learned to do over time. So it's never, to answer your question, it's never like, it never goes from having no work-life balance to having the perfect work-life balance. You sort of slowly, like the balance changes over time. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, my second question was more so about like your aesthetic, like your personal aesthetic, and how you kind of hold on to your own creative style while gearing a style towards a company.
Yeah. That what's harder to do is not, so I think it's easy for me to hang on to my own personal style. It's hard, and not be influenced by that company. It's harder for me not to try to put my own personal style onto each of those companies, right? Each of those brands. And again, that just goes back to thinking about who the client is for each brand. But I don't, you know what, I don't really think my personal style has, it may have evolved over time, but it wasn't like I went from having, a super preppy style to a super bohemian style. It was always sort of a mix of all of those things together. And I think that's what personal style is really anyway, right? It's about what just innately like feels natural for you to throw on. Does that make sense?
Yeah. All right, thank you.
That's the most fun thing, right? Like personal style, and sort of like having fun with personal style and developing personal style. I just think I don't know, that's always been a really fun part of
Definitely.
getting up and addressing the day, right?
Yeah, definitely. Next student is Anna Galstian. Okay. Oh, there she is.
Hi.
Hi, how are
Uh,
you?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
My question is, what is a major key experience that you've had that helped shape your leadership skills, and what advice would you give to students to develop their leadership skills in the fashion industry?
Yeah. I think I didn't ever take any classes in leadership. I think I learned by example and learned both what I want, how I wanted to show up as a leader and also from people, and also how I didn't want to show up as a leader from people. And I think being authentic and real, I think one of the things that I've learned over time is people want honesty, and they want, although sometimes it's hard to have and also hard to receive, sort of like those tougher, more honest conversations. It's really important, because you always get to a better place after you've had those. And um, I also feel like I'm an optimistic and enthusiastic leader. I feel like I owe that to the people that work for me, and I also owe that to the people that I work for. Um, so again, I think I've learned it over time, and by different leaders who I've had, who have set what I've thought is really great examples, and other leaders who I've thought, oof, no, that doesn't work. And I don't want to. I'm going to learn from that, not to show up that way. And I'm learning every day. You know, I'm learning. Um, I've been lucky to be surrounded by some pretty amazing leaders, and I appreciate that every single day. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
I think it did. So basically, put your best foot forward
I
and
would
just
say,
stay
yeah,
optimistic and
I think characteristics are optimism for sure. I think collaboration is very important. I think being open to a lot of people's point of view, and then not being. I think another great attribute of being a leader is not being afraid to put a stake in the ground. And if it's the wrong stake, that's fine. Be accountable. Like, okay, I made a mistake, and we're moving on. But you know, one of the most frustrating things that I find, that I have found in leaders, when they have the inability to put a stake in the ground, and to,
Mhm.
because a lot of people don't want to be wrong, you know. But I think it's better to put a stake in the ground and be wrong than not to put a stake in the ground at all.
Yeah.
Right.
All
Right.
right. Up next, I have Sungi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. How are you?
Hi, good, thank you.
My question is, now many companies are laying off designers due to the coronavirus, and what are the prospects for hiring designer after the coronavirus is quiet? Do you have any advice for students who are graduating this year?
I think that is such a great question, and if I had an answer for you, I think, it would be fantastic. But I think that all of this is so, like, we're in the unknown. You know, we don't know we don't know how long it's going to last. We don't know what the economy is going to look like. I think that design students, and all students, right, graduating, are in a,
Yeah.
sort of this time of unknown. Um, I think
Network,
you're gonna
network,
have to
network,
stay.
I would say. Sorry.
What's that?
Sorry to butt in on you, but I would just say that building your network during this time when everyone's home and available, and connecting through LinkedIn and getting your name out there as best you can would be one piece of advice I would
So
throw.
that's why
Yeah,
I
I think that's a great
Right.
idea. And also, I think just staying fluid and flexible. Like, I think every day is gonna look different, right? And I think just staying open to new ideas and new opportunities. Um, I think it's gonna be a must.
In the interest of time, since I know you have a hard stop at 5:30, I want to go on. Veskananda, you had a hand up.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, good luck.
Thank you.
Hi.
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 So my question is regarding your men's company. Do you speak a little bit on that, on how you started it, how you ran your business, how you went, how you basically conducted your operation as a men's company?
Yeah, I think you were sort of going in and going out, your audio. I think what you asked is for me to talk about a little bit about how I got my menswear business going. Is that correct?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
So when I was living in Southern California, after I graduated from Boulder, I moved back to Southern California because that's where I was from, and I grew up in a beach community there in Southern California. And as I said earlier, the skate industry and the surf industry was a really big, there was a really big sort of clothing trend around both of those industries. And we started, it was me and a friend of mine started design. We hired a pattern maker. I mean, it was very, very grassroots, very tiny, like worked out of our garage. Hired a pattern maker, bought fabrics in LA, had clothes sewn in San Diego. I lived in Newport Beach at the time, but we would drive down to San Diego to like all these little factories and have clothes made. And we would go to retail sort of like shows at convention centers and sell our brand. And our brand ended up in multiple surf and skate shops. And we built, a small business. And what happened was I didn't want to do skate and surf clothes anymore. I really had these dreams of moving to New York City and having runway shows. And so that's what I did. I applied to Parsons. I moved to New York City. I started going to Parsons and interning at Isaac Mizrahi, and took my menswear show and had runway shows. And you know what, it was when there were 17 runway shows, not a season in menswear, not 110 runway
Right.
shows. It was a very different, a very different time. And I just, the great thing about that time for me was I had no reason not to do anything. I had no fear. I just figured I just did it. I didn't even know how I was going to do it. I just put one foot in front of the other. And I wasn't, it wasn't a daunting task at that time. I can imagine now with, it's a different industry now. There are hundreds of shows now. I don't know if I'd do it if I were that age, if I were young now. But I just put one foot in front of the other, step by step. At that time I had a studio down on Wooster Street, a loft studio that I lived out of and ran the company out of. And I hired like 4 sewers, a pattern maker, a draper, and we just made
Oh, wow.
clothes. It was amazing. Very, very small. It was amazing. It was a good time. Very stressful, but good time.
Right.
Up next, I have Chu Yeonjin.
Hi, can you see me, right?
Yep, we can hear you, but that's okay.
Okay. So my question is, you said you run 3 different brands like Antelope, Loft, and then Logris. So my question is, in terms of sales, which one has higher share, and which one sells better, and then why do you think? What do you think is the reason?
Well, okay, so Loft is by far the biggest brand financially. From a business perspective, Loft is probably, I'm going to say, 5 times bigger than Ann Taylor, and this is a ridiculous number, but 100 times bigger than Lou and Grey. I mean, Lou and Grey is tiny right now, and that's okay. I think Loft just has much more of a mass appeal. I think it's a price point that a lot of people understand. I think it's very accessible to a lot of people. Over time, we have more stores than any of the other brands do. The funny thing is about this though is Ann Taylor. The name Ann Taylor has much higher recognition worldwide. So people hear the word Ann Taylor and they're like, oh yeah, I know Ann Taylor. And a lot of people hear Loft and they're like, what? What's Loft? Which is funny to me because the business is so much bigger. And then Lou and Gray is, relatively new and just tiny, 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 and which is great because we're gearing it towards a totally different audience than is meant for Ann Taylor or Loft. And I think that's what's really fun too about having 3 brands that appeal to 3, they do have halo, they have overlap, but 3 brands that essentially appeal to 3 different people, 3 different types of clients.
Yes. So basically, because the Loft is because cheaper, so it's sell better than others, you think?
Yes, because of the price point is less expensive. A lot of people find Ann Taylor they feel Ann Taylor is quite expensive, and where they feel Loft is like a more reasonable price point.
Okay, got it. I like Ann Taylor. I always go to Ann Taylor.
Oh, good. I'm so glad to hear that.
Next time, there is one, right? 49.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Thank you.
up next I have Yinglin He.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
My question is, what made you decide to pursue a career in interior design? Because I know a lot of young designers, they want to explore different areas in design. And do you find the transition hard?
I didn't find the transition hard at all in terms of doing the work. Like the work came very naturally to me. I think the hardest thing for me always I never had a problem creating things. I'm not good at selling things. So, doing the interior design work again came very naturally. But I wasn't good at like selling my ability to do it, if that makes sense. So I'm not the type of person who wants to go out and try to get clients. So the clients that I had came to me through my husband's business and then also friends or friends of friends. And it wasn't like I wasn't committing to grow an interior design business. It was just that I had multiple projects that sort of came to me through word of mouth. I guess that's how I get everything is word of mouth, which I think there's a reason for that. I'm just not comfortable selling myself at all. But no, the going sort of transitioning from fashion design, the work of fashion design into the work of interior design was a very smooth, natural transition for me.
The next question from Austyn Morrow.
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, hi, Austyn. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Let's see if I can get. Okay. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Awesome. So
I can now. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
So I was really curious about how you got from fine arts to fashion design because I really enjoy fine arts, but how do you think that fine arts has influenced your career in fashion design?
Yeah, I think when I was growing up, as I mentioned before, there really like jobs for fashion designer, it wasn't something I knew really existed when I was growing up. So I was just always interested in drawing and painting and sculpture. And without sort of knowing, oh, but you can go to school and study fashion, I really didn't realize that or find that out until later. Fine arts just seemed like a natural place for me to land in terms of studying. And then by the time I sort of went through my college years, I became more educated about, oh, but there are jobs in fashion. You can go to fashion design school. And actually that led me initially when I was in high school, actually, when I went to Parsons between my junior and senior year, I went and I studied fine art, painting and drawing, but they also had a fashion design illustration, a fashion illustration class there, which I took. And I think that sort of opened my eyes to, okay, maybe you can get jobs in fashion design. But there really wasn't like a grand strategy to it, to what I did. It just sort of like one thing melded into another.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that's kind of what I was curious about, is how that path works. But awesome, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. I can't hear you, Carolyn. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I was on mute. I have 5 more hands up, but I don't know if you need to go. I know you had a meeting.
I
Sorry.
have a 5:30 appointment. I'm so not appointment, but a meeting that just got called this morning.
Yes.
So I'm sorry, I do have to go.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for being here, and wish you the best of luck in the coming weeks, and hopefully we're all back in the office soon and getting life going again.
Thank you. And this was great. I'm so glad this worked out. It was really great, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
We're going to stay on, but bye.
Thank you.
So students, I'm just going to flip back quickly to go over this slide on reading sales reports. And like I said, this is just a high level thing. I think that it would be really in your best interest to kind of go in and meet someone who works in sales or planning or merchandising or buying, who could really talk you through how the numbers work in the specific company you're going to work for. The better that you understand this, the better that you're going to be as a designer, and the more that you're going to be able to adapt and react to your customer. And I do not think that numbers should get in the way of your creativity and your thought process. They should not guide you from the forefront, but it should be something that's in the back of your mind, because at the end of the day, you're going to want to be selling your products, whether you're working for yourself or you're working for someone else. The more you sell, obviously, the better you're going to do, and the more you get to design and the more you get to create. So what I have taken here is a snapshot of one of my old sales reports from Ralph Lauren in a particularly dismal week. But you can see here the lineup for Macy's. And this is broken out. I don't know if there's a way that I can make my cursor show to you guys. But if you see on the leftmost column, it's broken out by the way that Macy's divides up their business. So there's total omni, which includes both the brick and mortar, both the stores and the e-commerce. And then it's broken out by region. So you can see in the Northeast, North Central, Northwest, South, and Southwest. The reason, well, Macy's is set up to really look at their business that way, but it's also important for you to know as a designer, you know, maybe you're really, really struggling in the Northeast, but you're hand and fist doing successfully in the South. And you can kind of glean, okay, well, maybe it's the type of product that I'm offering. It's a little bit too light for this time of year, and it's actually really cold in the Northeast, and that's not working out for them. So that might be able to give you a glimpse into why the product is selling or not selling. But this is a very typical flash of something you might see in a sales report. The first column is TY, or this year. So in this case, we're looking at the week of selling, this year selling. Second column is plan. The plan is a number that is set forth at the beginning of the season about how you want to perform in a given week or month or season, depending on which time frame you're looking at. And obviously you want your sales to be higher than that number, because that means that you're doing better and you're making more money for the company than you had set out to, or you had anticipated or bought the stock to perform to. So this year to plan, and then the next column will be the percent to plan, which is just a percent change formula, which if you've ever taken any basic math classes would just be this year minus plan divided by plan to get that number. And then there's the last year number, which is the same thought process. You want to beat the last year number, and it all kind of lines up to how much stock that you've bought this year compared to last year, or LY. But if you compare this year to last year, then you get the same percent change to LY, similar to the percent change to plan. which would be this year minus last year divided by last year. Any questions? I'm gonna just do a quick, on the next slide, it's broke classification. So it follows the same general format. The sales dollars that you did, the sales units that you did. The AUR is a very common factor that people consider. It is average unit retail, so it means how much you actually sold units for last week. So you take the dollars and you divide by the units, and that gives you the AUR. And you know, this is a really good way for you to gauge. You can look at your selling from last week's AUR and compare it to last year's AUR and see, okay, last year I had dresses and they were selling for $57, and this year they're all going out the door for $33. You know, why is it so much cheaper this year? Which is driving up the business and making it go so much cheaper? Maybe you have a new program out there that is a really cheap entry-level price point that's dragging down the average unit retail. And so that's something that I think is important for a designer to understand. And the next two, which I think designers typically that I've worked with are really focused on, is what is your percent of sales to your percent of stock. So that is the column, the almost all the way to the right columns. There's weeks of supply is the last column and the last two. And this is the percent of sales that you actually did that sold out the door last week versus the percent of stock that you have on hand. So the percent of stock is how much you bought and brought in, how much you planned to sell, ideally, and the percent of sales is how much actually sold. So if there's a huge disparity between those two numbers, you didn't buy it right and the customer is not satisfied. So dresses, in this instance, was 30% of the sales and 43% of the stock. That is a not very great ratio because that means you have a lot more dresses than you are actually selling in a week. And I think this is a really important place for designers to dive in and understand, okay, when I go to look for next season, I need to make sure I buy I offer my buyer way less dresses because the customer is really not reacting the way that they should. Questions? My last slide here is just some key terms for you guys. So I went over TY, which equals this year, LY, which equals last year, and PL, which equals plan. I think these are three very universal terms that you're going to see no matter where you go to work, that you should at least understand when you're looking at the page what the numbers are representing in sales. Sales to stock ratio is an important factor. That's what I was just talking through to you guys. It's the percentage of selling in sales compared to the percentage of selling in stock, and how those numbers line up with each other is an important thing to consider. Sell-through is the percent of stock sold. So if you bring in 10 dresses and you sell 5 of them last week, then you had a 50% sell-through. You have now sold through 50% of the product that you had on hand. The higher that number is, the better. In an ideal world, you'll sell through 100% of your stock in the given time frame that you plan to, say 6 weeks. And that's when you're having a really strong business and a really great business. The weeks of supply is how long it will take you to sell out of something. So in that same case, where you have 10 dresses and you sold 5 last week, your weeks of supply is only 2 weeks. You're going to sell out of that dress in another week if you sell another 5 next week. So it helps to kind of understand which, how strong and how well your product is selling. Ideally, you know, if you're working for an Ann Taylor or something, you're bringing in a new collection every single month. The ideal is that you would be sold out of that product every single month, or at least within 6 weeks or so. So you want to see when that product first hits the sales floor, you have 6 weeks of supply on hand because you know you bought 60 and you sold 10 last week, and that means that you're moving in a really strong trajectory. I know this is a very, very fast drive-by on the terms, but I think particularly next week when we have Michael Kors coming in, and there may be a sales director joining us, and I want to make sure that I gave you guys a moment to kind of think about the way that you look at a sales report. And like I said, I think it's going to be super important when you get on the job that this is something you take a moment to talk with the buying team. Anyone who wants to have strong business is going to want to talk with their designers and make sure that they understand the selling and where the sales are coming from. And like I said, I think from a creative perspective, you guys being the creative force, it should not be driving your boat, but it should be at least a factor that you're considering, because if you are completely blindsided to the business and not paying attention to it, it's going to be very hard for you to be successful. Does anyone have any questions? B.
Would these terms and how to read the charts be on the final?
No, they won't be. Just for you guys.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great. Actually, I loved it. I thought it was good to learn how to read this stuff, and I like math, so
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And look, I think I often have students in here who are not math students, and you shouldn't be. You're creative students. But at the same time, it's not intimidating math, and I think the earlier you understand that it's actually very, very simple math, the less intimidated you'll feel by the numbers, and the easier it'll be to just kind of have a very baseline understanding of what they mean. No one's going to ever ask you to recreate these reports if you're a designer, but just good to understand them a little bit.
All right, thank you.
No problem. Anyone else? Dominique. Dominique, are you there? No? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Oh, now we hear you. Yep.
Yes. Question. So for those who weren't able to ask what they had already sent before the presentation today, can we still email you what we picked up if they were to answer
Absolutely.
questions?
Yes. Sorry, I should have said that at the end of her. If she already answered your question for you, and you feel like you can answer it, that's fine, and I'll give you credit for that. If you feel like she totally didn't answer any of the questions you had touched upon, shoot me a note and I can try to put you in touch with her.
Okay, sweet. Thank you.
No problem. Anyone else? All right, great. Thanks, you guys. We have 2 amazing lectures left. I'm not going to take roll call today, so I'll take your original attendance and the log as counting you guys this year. But stay safe and healthy this week, and if you need anything, I am here to chat. Thanks. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.